Yo, welcome to Shane's Take. I'm your host, Shane Norman, and today we'll be going over the NFC East, their draft, their free agency, as well as way too early predictions as to who's going to win this division. Finally, we're going to wrap this thing up. I'm sorry for the wait, but let's get started. I've been real excited to cover this division considering I'm a Cowboys fan, so I follow this division closer than most. At least I have in the past. That will change. But we'll start with the Washington Commanders. I typically don't call them that, actually. But out of respect for them, they'll be the Commanders in this video. So in free agency, they lost Taylor Heineke. They lost Bobby McCain, one of their safeties, as well as Cole Holcomb and Cody Barton, which are two of their linebackers. I know Corey Holcomb, I believe he was a starter. But they ended up getting Andrew Wiley, a right tackle, Nick Gates, a center. They got Jacoby Brissett, which I like. As far as like, he can win you games and also manage the game. You know, to where you don't, he won't particularly lose you a game. He's a competent quarterback at least. But I know from watching Washington, one of their main needs, of course, was quarterback. But also their secondary. Their secondary was pretty bad last year. I mean, they had Kendall Fuller starting at corner, and he's really a nickel corner who plays in the slot, basically. So they went out and got Emmanuel Forbes with their first pick, the corner out of Mississippi State. Haven't seen a lot of film on him. Gonna go back and watch, but a lot of people were high on him in the draft as far as projections and whatnot. But from what I have seen, stud. And they also went out and got Jartavius Martin out of Illinois. Illinois had I gotta go back and look and see what their secondary looked like, because a lot of their their secondary went in the top part of the draft. But then they went in the third round and got Ricky Stromberg, a center out of Arkansas. So I feel like they addressed their offensive line in the secondary, which was two things they needed to. But, you know, very pedestrian offseason, really. I mean, they really didn't do anything to move the needle for them, in my opinion. I'll give their offseason I'll give it a C+, just because they addressed needs that they had to in the draft. And they also got Cam Dantzler out of Minnesota, who I actually liked. If you don't know who that is, number 3 for Minnesota, you could look at some of his tape. Young guy, and he looks promising to me. But all in all, man, nothing too impressive there. So we move along to the New York Football Giants, man, and they had more of an impressive offseason. I wouldn't call it impressive per se, but it was solid. They went out and got Darren Waller. Then they went and got Ashawn Robinson, an inside D lineman, which they already have a strong interior. Then they went and got Raheem Nunez Roaches, and Paris Campbell. That's an inside D lineman and a wide receiver. Paris Campbell, I believe he came out of Indianapolis. And then they lost Richie James, Julian Love, John Feliciano, who I believe was one of their guards. Julian Love was a safety. Richie James ended up going to Kansas City, if I'm not mistaken. So they lost a little there. It was really give or take, but the Darren Waller pickup was huge for them, in my opinion. I think that'll help Daniel Jones out a lot. I don't really think much of him at all, but he's decent, and he's one of those quarterbacks where you get him a safety valve like Darren Waller, he could have success. So they went out in the first round and got a corner out of Maryland, Deontay Banks. Then they turned around and got a center in the second round, John Michael Schmitz. And then they got Jalen Hyde in the third, which I thought was interesting. I think they had a pretty good draft. considering what they were able to address. Then they went in the 5th round and got Eric Gray, a running back out of Oklahoma. So, interested to see what they do. I think they're a solid team. I think they have a good foundation built there. But this is a division where, it's a very top-heavy division. And whether or not I think they did enough to compete at the top of the division, we'll find out here in a moment. But now we move on to the cream of the crop of the division. So we have the Philadelphia Eagles. They had an offseason. A lot of people are high on it. To me, I think I'm not as high on their offseason as everybody else is. I mean, what they were able to do in the draft was phenomenal, but I think that they lost some key pieces to this team, to that championship team, and I think we're going to see it this year. So they lost Jonathan Hargrave, who was a D tackle. He went to San Francisco. They lost Isaac Semelau. I probably just jacked his name. But anyways, he was a left guard. Pretty solid. They lost him. They lost Andre Dillard. They lost Kazir White. TJ Edwards. That's both for their linebackers right there. Then they lost Zach Pascal, Miles Sanders, and CJ Garner-Johnson, as well as Marcus Epps. I think those last 3 names are going to have a heavier impact on at least what the defense looks like, in my opinion. But they were also able to add Greedy Williams, DeAndre Swift, and Rashad Penny. I don't think that replaces Miles Sanders at all. I actually think Miles Sanders is grotesquely underrated as far as where he stands as a running back. I look at him as another Miles Sanders. The difference is Saquon Barkley has an offense in New York that makes him the focal point as opposed to in Philly. Now, when they ran him this year, you saw what the results were. 1,200 yards. I mean, he just balled. But I think that's going to be a big loss for them. But then they turn around in the draft and just kill it. They went and got Jalen Carter, D tackle out of Georgia, in the 1st round. Then later in the 1st round, they went out and got Nolan Smith, an edge rusher out of Georgia, linebacker. I wouldn't call him Micah Parsons, but he has that ability to play the edge as well as linebacker. Then they went and got Tyler Steen, an old tackle out of Alabama. Then they got Sidney Brown, and they got both of these guys in the 3rd. They got Sidney Brown, a safety out of Illinois. So I think they had an interesting draft. And I think that... they also turned around and got Keely Ringo, another linebacker out of Georgia. So Georgia heavy draft. Very SEC heavy for sure, but I think if these rookies pan out, maybe they could offset what they lost in the offseason. But I'm interested to see what they turn out to be. Really good, talented team, deep. So I don't know how much those losses will affect them. Also, they got Marcus Mariota, which is big. You saw when Jalen Hurts wasn't playing, the offense was not the same at all. Gardner Minshew wasn't able to facilitate the type of style offense that they run. So, they're thinking in their front office for sure. But the last and final team in this division is the Dallas Cowboys. And I thought they probably had the better I think you could rank their offseason right there next to Philly's. We might have an edge. Well, I'd call it even, just considering the fact that I feel like they did much better in the draft than we did, obviously. But we made up for it in free agency, and we also had a pretty decent draft ourselves. So they went out so we lost Dalton Schultz, Noah Brown, and Carlos Watkins. I don't think any of those losses were significant. But we were able to get Brandon Cooks, wide receiver out of Houston, Stephon Gilmore, who, though he played for the Indianapolis Colts, he had a hell of a year. If you go back and watch the tape and look at the stats, he actually had a hell of a year. Then we got Ronald Jones II, which is nice. We got him for short yardage purposes, I assume, and for some running back depth, but I'll save that for another day. But in the first round of our draft, we went and got Mozzie Smith at D tackle out of Michigan. Turned around and got Luke Schoonmaker, a tight end out of Michigan. Well, we got a D tackle out of Michigan. Then we got Luke Schoonmaker, who's a tight end out of Michigan. Sounded like I said the same thing. But then we turned around and got DeMarvion Overshown, a linebacker who played some safety in Texas in the third round, as well as Villami Fehoko, an edge rusher out of San Jose State, who's actually cousins to Vita Vea. But all in all, I think... Oh, yeah, and they got Deuce Vaughn in the 6th round out of K-State, which is actually a pretty interesting pick, considering he's the shortest player in NFL history. And I don't know how much that's going to matter. We'll have to see throughout minicamp and OTAs, but that's a sneaky pick that everybody's been excited about, and I'm excited to see what that turns into. But, by the way, I give Philly's offseason an A, if I didn't make that abundantly clear. But I'll give the Cowboys offseason, I'll give them a B+. I think that we addressed some things. I know one of our bigger issues over the course of these past, I'd say 4 or 5 seasons, have been the interior pressure on our D-line. It has been non-existent. Don't hurt yourself and turn on the tape. Just take my word for it. It's pretty hard to watch. But I think our tight end room is deep, so I don't think that the loss of Dalton Schultz was really too big. And I think we're going to see that this year. I think we'll see another emerging tight end this year in Jake Ferguson. If Schoonmaker just doesn't destroy in the offseason and end up taking a starting spot. So, interesting division, man. Very tough. I think between New York, Philly, and Dallas, it's not going to be, nobody's being handed this division. But I digress. Where do I see everybody finishing? So I have Washington, of course, is going to be at the bottom of the division. They still don't even know who owns the team yet. And they didn't address the quarterback position in a way that will make it to where they can win today. At least not in this division, no. So they'll finish last. I have New York third. This is where it gets tricky for me. There hasn't been a division winner in back-to-back seasons for as long as I can remember. And typically, I know that Philly is the favorite to win the division. I know that they're the favorite as far as the best roster constructed. But I feel like Philly finishes at a close second. And Dallas ends up winning the division. Not only because I'm a fan, but just because of the simple fact that I think they lost a lot on offense in Miles Sanders. And I think it's going to show. But, I mean, Dallas might win this division by a game, if at all. But I'm taking Dallas to win the division, considering the history. Usually we trade. And that's also barring injury. But it'll definitely be a close second. And do know I understand that Philly's the favorite. But that's my take on the NFC East. Leave your comments down below. Let me know what you think. But that's my word, man. I appreciate it. I'm out.